This is Peter Coffey, Head of Platform Research with Salesforce.com, here on the stage at Salesforce Live, here at Dreamforce 2010 in the Moscone Convention Center, where the river of humanity going back and forth between the various sessions and the expo continues unabated. I'm here with Dr. Robert Lustig of UC San Francisco, UCSF. There are a lot of UCs, but UCSF is unique, as we've heard earlier, and I'd like to talk about that with you a little bit. And Robert, I'm told that we just had to get you on because your session is being completely mobbed, and we just got to get this content out here. Dr. Lustig, you have been talking on the topic of sugar, the bitter truth, and I suspect you've got some things to tell us about the role of sugar in our diets and our lifestyles that many people will find uncomfortable to hear, but potentially quite valuable. Tell us a little bit about your background and about what you've been sharing with people here at Dreamforce.
Well, I'm an endocrinologist, so I study hormones, and one of the phenomena that has basically overtaken the entire of the human race, of course, is obesity, but more importantly, chronic metabolic disease. So all of the things that go along with obesity,
so
for
diabetes
instance,
type 2 and
hypertension, cardiovascular disease, but also cancer and Alzheimer's disease go along as well.
Those are not considered to be metabolic phenomena?
These are all chronic metabolic diseases.
I did not realize that.
And people don't normally, but the fact is, they all go under the same aegis, and obesity is a co-risk factor for all of them.
I see.
The question is, what's driving this, and why has this epidemic occurred over the last 30 years?
Right.
What's changed?
Right.
People talk about obesity being the ultimate interaction between our DNA and our environment. Well, our DNA hasn't changed, but our environment sure has.
Certainly.
So the question is, what changed? And that's what I've been talking about today, and apparently it's resonated a chord.
Well, tell me about the environmental factors other than the obvious, which is the proliferation of fast food, or does that need to be reiterated as obvious?
Well, people think that fast food's there because we want it, but it's actually a little bit different.
Okay.
First, let's talk about the concept of a calorie.
Okay.
If you believe a calorie is a calorie, then
I've heard that from reputable sources,
then the answer is eat less, exercise more. It's free will, personal responsibility, gluttony and sloth, diet and exercise. Basically, you can go on.
Works for me, but it turns out that doesn't capture the picture at all,
no,
does it?
not a bit.
All right.
Not a bit. But that's what the government would have you believe.
Really?
And,
okay.
Well, in part because then they don't have to pay for it.
Okay.
It's also what the food industry would have you believe because then they're not responsible for it.
It allows them to throw the responsibility over the side and make it an individual lifestyle choice.
Exactly.
Okay.
All right.
Here
are 6 reasons why that's not true.
6?
6.
Wow.
Number 1, no child chooses to be obese. The quality of life of an obese child is the same as a child on cancer chemotherapy. Do you think anybody chooses to be obese?
No, okay.
Number 2, do diet and exercise work? No, they don't.
Okay.
They work initially, and then it all comes back, and everybody knows it.
Okay.
The number of people who can keep their weight off after 5 years is 1%. So are the rest just gluttons and sloths? Come on.
Okay, all right.
Number 3, this isn't just America that this is happening in.
No.
This is in every country, developed and developing.
Yes. Yeah.
Including countries that used to be malnourished, now have more obese than malnourished. There are now 50% more obese people in the world than there are malnourished people in the world, taking into account even Africa with AIDS.
That's a stat I have not heard before.
Number 4.
Okay.
The poor are disproportionately affected. You know,
that I have heard. That is a mystery, isn't it?
Yeah, but they don't have access to diet and exercise like the rest of us.
Okay.
They can't even let their kids out of the house for fear of crime.
Okay.
And they don't even have a choice because they don't have supermarkets in poor neighborhoods.
Okay.
So if you don't have access, how can you call that personal responsibility?
Okay.
If it's not a choice.
Okay.
Number 5, the fastest growing obese segment of the population is the 2 to 5-year-old group.
Really?
Really.
Okay.
And number 6, we even have an epidemic of obese 6-month-olds.
No.
They don't diet and exercise.
Okay, now wait a minute. You're going to have to tell me what possible cause and effect mechanism could be causing an epidemic of obesity in 6-month-olds. I would have thought that. Thank you, please. I'd love to drill into that one right now.
Okay. Well, I've got to explain how this all came to be.
Yeah.
All right. Bottom line, what are we eating?
Okay.
What is it that we're eating?
Yes.
Is it fat? Are we eating more fat? No, actually, our fat consumption is exactly the same as it was 25 years ago.
That is very interesting because that's not the popular perception, I don't think.
Our percent consumption of fat's gone down from 40 to 30%,
Okay.
just like the AMA, the AHA, and the USDA told us to.
Okay.
And in the meantime, our obesity and metabolic syndrome rates have gone through the roof.
Okay.
So what is it we're eating? We're eating carbohydrate, lots of it.
Right.
And what carbohydrate? Sugar.
Simple carbohydrate.
Okay, so here's
Okay.
a quiz.
Yes, sir.
For your audience.
All right.
What do the Atkins diet and the traditional Japanese diet have in common?
They don't have sugar in them.
That's the thing they have in common, right?
Okay. That's the
Atkins
only
diet,
point
that's
of
the only-
intersection.
that's
They're,
the only
they're
point of
low
intersection.
sugar.
Right.
Okay.
The Atkins diet's all fat, no carb.
Yep.
Japanese diet's all carb, no fat.
Okay.
They look diametrically opposite.
And what about the so-called
No sugar.
Mediterranean diet?
No sugar.
No sugar.
No sugar.
Okay.
The
Oils are
Italians-
okay.
the
Wine is
Italians-
okay, but not sugar.
Exactly.
Okay.
There's no sugar in the Mediterranean diet except for the occasional gelato, and they don't have very many gelatos in Italy.
No, that's very
Believe it or
interesting.
not.
That, as soon as you point that out, it seems blindingly obvious, but I think a lot of people don't think about it.
Right. Well,
Yeah.
processed food
Yeah.
is sugar-containing food on purpose.
Yes.
Number one, for palatability, which you might as well just draw the line to sales.
Yes.
Which is exactly right.
Sure.
And number two, for shelf life,
Okay.
because sugar basically excludes water. Have you ever
Oh.
noticed that bread doesn't stale anymore?
My wife and I make ours in a machine, actually.
Then it
so
stales.
yeah, and it does, yeah.
Right.
And
But if you
I
buy-
have wondered about that.
But if you buy commercially available bread at
It
the local
sits
supermarket,
around for a lot longer. Yeah,
do you remember bread boxes?
I do.
Yeah, I do too. But
Yeah.
you know what? Have you ever seen a bread box in the last 20 years?
No one
Reason?
keeps a bread box anymore. Yeah.
Because the sugar in the bread replaces the water.
Wow.
Decreases the water activity.
Okay.
Therefore, the water isn't there to evaporate,
to nurture the
and
mold.
so you don't
and-
stale.
Okay.
And it also reduces bacterial overgrowth.
Right. All right.
They do it on purpose.
Okay.
The question is, what is this sugar glut that we have basically found ourselves in? What is it doing to us? We used to consume 30 grams of sugar a day. We now consume 200 grams of sugar a day.
Now, is that a
7
U.S.
times
average or a
more.
global average?
That's a U.S. average.
U.S. average. Okay. And is that substantially the same in other developed countries or not?
A little less, but you know what? They're catching up,
Okay.
and so are their disease rates.
That's one of the things I've read is that as soon as the standard of living rises above almost a subsistence level in any economy, they start acting like Americans.
Exactly
They
right.
they start eating white rice instead of brown rice, and they start eating white flour instead of whole grain flour, and now I think you're going to tell me they start consuming Coca-Cola and other high sugar.
Absolutely.
I'm sorry,
And
soft
other-
drinks and other high sugar foods.
And other governments are happy to import the Western diet because it's cheap.
Really.
Absolutely.
It is not a matter of affluence enabling it. It's actually a cheaper way to feed people.
Exactly.
Wow.
That's why we have obesity in Africa now.
Now, tell me something. I mean, where does the sugar come from? As a matter of global macroeconomics, who exports sugar to whom?
Okay. Well, in America, we
Yeah.
make our sugar
From
the
corn.
old-fashioned way, from corn.
From corn,
Right.
yeah, right.
Okay.
Where we take petroleum, make fertilizer, use that to grow corn, which we then turn into ethanol at a net negative energy balance.
Exactly.
So don't get me started on biofuels, but let's talk about dietary sugar.
That's right. So 16% of all of the corn goes to high fructose corn syrup. Now, the Corn Refiners Association have been very upset because we've demonized high fructose corn syrup as the cause of obesity. I am very specifically here to tell you that high fructose corn syrup is no worse than standard table sugar, cane sugar, beet sugar, the stuff you put in your coffee. Exactly the same. Equally bad, equally poisonous. The
Okay.
corn refiners take it on the chin.
Yeah.
I'm not here to support them. I'm
No.
here to detract from them, but the regular sugar industry is equally at fault, and they're getting a free ride, and that's not okay.
That's really interesting. So the notion that anyone should be able to label a product as made with real cane sugar
Is a joke.
as if that were some kind of differentiator from that awful high fructose corn syrup
Mexican
stuff.
Coke,
That's just
throwback
a
Pepsi.
fraud.
Absolutely.
Wow.
Complete and utter fraud.
That's a statement that I think is going to rock a lot of people back. I think
Well-
that you're challenging a lot of perceived truths here.
Well, you know what?
Yeah.
That's why I'm in the unusual thinkers track, and that's why the food industry is not very happy with me.
So, what are people's options living in the USA or in another developed economy? What are your options for radical reduction of simple carbohydrate consumption and specifically what I guess we would call refined sugar consumption?
Well, here's the problem. Sugar is addicting.
Okay. You mean you have
In this-
withdrawal from it?
Absolutely.
Really? Literally addictive.
I just showed a clip my talk.
Yes.
Of Morgan Spurlock in Supersize Me on day 18 of his ordeal.
Harrowing experience, wasn't it? Yeah.
Where he described drug withdrawal.
Wow.
When he was without McDonald's for 4 hours.
Okay.
So he was a vegan, eating his girlfriend's vegan food.
Yes.
And in 18 days, he became an addict.
And how long did it take to get off of
Unaddict him. It usually takes 3 weeks.
Wow.
So if sugar's addicting, how do you tell people to just lay off this stuff?
Because initially, it makes them feel terrible.
Right.
Yeah.
So if I told you
Yeah.
that the breakfast cereal that you've been eating for the last 25 years was laced with morphine and told you to stop eating it, could you?
Not an experiment I'm eager to try.
Well, the fact of the matter is, it's
it
just
would be
the same thing.
Yes, that's really a devastating comparison.
So every substance that activates the reward center of the brain, cocaine, amphetamine, nicotine, cannabis, ethanol, heroin, doesn't matter, has required both individual intervention, which you might, for lack of a better word, we could call rehab.
Yes.
And also societal intervention, for the lack of a better word, we would call laws, like taxation.
Well, taxation would be a start, wouldn't it? I mean,
Sugar taxation's on the table.
What is it really? In what form?
Well, New York State's debating it.
Okay.
We're debating it here in San Francisco.
Okay.
Restriction of access.
Yes.
Okay. We keep alcohol out of the hands of kids because we know how bad it is.
Yes.
Well, fructose, the sweet part of sugar,
yes,
is the exact same thing as ethanol. It's alcohol without the buzz. There's no difference.
Okay, I knew they were related. I didn't realize they were that identical. That's fascinating.
That was what the talk was about. They're metabolically parallel. And they do the same things to your liver, and they do the same things to your brain. So maybe we should take a page from the alcohol control book and say, okay, what should we do to try to limit sugar cessation? There are ways to do it that have been done around the world to limit alcohol consumption. The Nordic countries do it. Other countries have learned that you have to tax it in order to reduce consumption. Ultimately, interdiction isn't going to work, but that's okay. There are other ways to do it. But we got to get government on board. Okay, well, of all the behavioral interventions I need to commit myself to doing in the coming year, apart from managing my caffeine, my sugar, and my consumption of internet content, I guess I now need to work on reducing my sugar consumption. We've been talking about sugar, the bitter truth, one of the many interesting topics on the Unusual Thinkers track here at Dreamforce 2010. If you want to learn any more, you can go to youtube.com and look up Sugar, the Bitter Truth.